is Keys to the Shop, episode 203, Empowering Women in Business with Katherine Knapke. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFerio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time, welcome to Keys to the Shop. I'm super excited that you decided to check out the show. We've got a lot of episodes, getting close to 300 or so if you count our shift break episodes. So going to keystotheshop.com and clicking on the episode page would be a good idea. There's some words you can click on there that will help you find episodes related to a topic that you're interested in. And for sure, I recommend that you subscribe to this podcast, and that way you'll always be updated with new episodes dropping on a weekly basis. Again, super excited to have you along. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers, and what makes them the best is their undying dedication to two things: curating the best coffee equipment from all over the world, and when they bring it in, the next step is to match it with your situation to make sure you're getting the right equipment for the job. So if you're looking to open your first coffee bar or your second coffee bar, or you just want to upgrade your existing equipment, they can help you with everything from brewers, espresso machines, grinders, hot water towers, smallware, as well as things like sinks and under-counter refrigeration. Pretty much the whole spectrum of commercial equipment that you're going to need in the shop, you can find over at prima-coffee.com. Now, when you go to the website, I'm sure you're going to be impressed by their selection, but also I think you should check out their resources that they have available to you to help you learn about this equipment and how to make amazing coffee. And they do all of this because helping you make great coffee consistently is what drives them. So I highly advise that you reach out to Prima Coffee for your commercial coffee equipment needs. In order to let them know that you heard about them on this show, just go to this website, prima-coffee.com/keys. Again, that's prima-coffee.com/keys. This episode is also brought to you by the amazing Barista Series from Pacific Foods. The Barista Series is a line of plant-based performance beverages that are designed specifically for the professional barista and the standards for excellence that they have for what they serve their customers. These products from the Barista Series line are designed not only for the barista, but with the feedback of the best baristas around the world. And so this stuff is bench tested before it's even launched into the market to make sure that it truly performs on the bar. So whether you're talking about the almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat, you're going to get a product that stands up to the heat from steaming, produces a great silky texture, great for latte art, and also keeps the flavor balance of the beverage focused on the coffee. Really important stuff for your customers and your business. So I recommend you get this in your store and try it out for yourself. Taste it, let your baristas taste it, and see what you think. I think you're really going to be impressed. PacificFoods.com, the place to go to learn more information about this. Just follow the link in the show notes. Again, get the Barista Series in your cafe and see how it elevates the plant-based offerings in your shop. All right, so today we get to dive into a topic that is really going to help equip you. We're talking about assertiveness. We're talking about negotiation. We're talking about confidence for women in the workplace with Katherine Knapke. Katherine Knapke is the Chief Operating Officer at the American Negotiation Institute. Katherine is passionate about using her experience as a psychiatric nurse trained in therapeutic crisis intervention and as a certified mediator to address psychological, emotional, and societal concerns that impact women in the workplace. Her goal is to use her experience to help women develop the skills and confidence they need to get more of what they want and deserve in the workplace. Katherine is also the host of the new podcast, Ask with Confidence. It's a women's-focused negotiation podcast designed to empower women and to help them gain the confidence they need when engaging in difficult situations. I'm really excited to welcome Katherine on the show to talk about this because in coffee, this is a very, very relevant and timely discussion. We, as a lot of industries, struggle to give equal footing to women in the workplace. And I think that this conversation is going to do a lot to further that discussion of women in the workplace in specialty coffee. And Katherine does a fantastic job of outlining the issues that are contributing and what to do about them and how to take the first steps in developing confidence in your skills as a communicator, things that are going to help you get ahead in the workplace. And I'm really grateful that we've got an opportunity to talk with someone like Katherine on the show. So without further ado, let's get right to this conversation about giving women confidence in business with Katherine Knapke. Well, Katherine, welcome to Keys to the Shop. Excited to have you on the show today. How's it going today?
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. I am so excited to be here, especially among fellow coffee aficionados. So I'm super excited to be here.
Well, this conversation, I think, is really going to pack a lot of value for listeners. As I do with most guests, I'd love to get some more detail on your background. I know you through our mutual friend, Kwame Christian, in the American Negotiation Institute. You've got your own podcast now that is focused on women in the workplace and negotiation, and that's kind of the direction of our conversation today. Give us a little background of yourself professionally and how you found yourself focusing on this as an area to help women in business.
Yeah, well, like you said, I work with Kwame Christian through the American Negotiation Institute. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. And I get this question a lot of how I came into this position. And the honest answer is I kind of fell into it. My background is not in negotiation at all. On my podcast, the very first episode, I talk about how I grew up in a background with parents that don't negotiate, and the idea of you should be grateful and accepting of things that are given to you. And so that was the model that was portrayed throughout my life, and it has caused a bunch of anxiety for me. So through school, my background is in nursing. I worked as a psychiatric nurse, trained in therapeutic crisis intervention. And for those who don't know what that is, it's essentially how to de-escalate a patient before having to move into more physical holds in order to get them to calm down. So very similar to like hostage negotiation would be what I compare it to, in that you are trying to talk somebody down from being a danger. And discovered through that nursing wasn't really my love. It wasn't passionate about it. But what I did love were those difficult conversations and the feeling after going through that conversation with a patient or with a doctor or somebody else on the treatment team and getting a successful outcome. And so for me, with a feeling anxious going into this, I started looking for other ways that I could improve this skill, and met Kwame, started working with him, and just fell in love with it and transitioned over into working in negotiation and difficult conversations full time. So my big push is, of course, with women, but showing them that they can have the confidence and helping build that confidence that they need in order to take those steps to get what they want.
That is fascinating. Is it a reaction to the way you were brought up, in that sense that you didn't see that modeled, but you pursued it because you knew that that was something that you were missing?
I think it was more of I could see other people doing it and just not knowing how or not having that shown to me felt like I was felt like I was severely lacking, and would get so much anxiety to the point where I would actually call off work sometimes if I knew something really difficult was coming up. So just wanting to figure out, okay, how can because I know that I have to do this. I know that I have to have these conversations, and I know that I can get more because I see people around me doing it. Mm-hmm. But how do I do that? So then it was up to me to pursue those opportunities and figure out how do I get better.
That's great. And thus the name of your podcast, Ask with Confidence. So kind of having stumbled into this, you are somewhat in the position of, I imagine, a lot of the people you work with the American Negotiation Institute. And with this podcast, Ask with Confidence, you are, I assume that a lot of people are just in a position where they haven't had formal training in negotiation. Not a lot of people have formal training in negotiation. So they're probably just thinking, well, what do I do now? Because maybe they're in a similar situation. Like, I wasn't brought up this way. I wasn't trained this way. My knee-jerk reaction might not be the most advantageous. So what kind of audience do you find yourself speaking to mostly? Is it that kind of demographic of people that are just kind of lost and just need to recalibrate their natural reaction to conflict?
So there's kind of two things in that. So, I mean, the audience is specifically towards women. And I only interview female guests, and everything is specifically targeted towards women. And a lot of that came out of the need for it. So I was working with Kwame at the time and would see a bunch of the comments coming through on his Negotiate Anything podcast, and wanting more something towards females, even though he does a very good job at interviewing both males and females. Sometimes there's a bit of that bias of, oh, well, there is a male host, or there's somewhere in this is a man's thing, and it's being mansplained to me. So then the female audience, or some people in the female audience, were feeling like they weren't getting anything out of it. So the need kind of came out of that. And, the people that listen to the podcast, we get a wide variety. Some people are just trying to brush up, like they might be in leadership positions already. And so they're just trying to figure out, how can I continue to be an effective and powerful leader in this position? Or we get all the way down from the bottom of, I just don't feel comfortable in my negotiation skills. I'm a female and I feel like things are different for me. So what kind of things do I need to do? And so it's wanting to make sure that I'm giving the information to somebody that's trying to move up or trying to get a voice, whether it be personal, professional areas, all the way up to those that are already kind of established, kind of have that solid foundation of negotiation skills, but are wanting to figure out, how can I enhance them and put myself in the best position as a leader.
Awesome. So what do you think? This is a huge question, I guess. So forgive me for painting with such a broad brush here, but what is the biggest issue facing women in the workplace based on what you've seen and all the people you've talked to, all the women you've talked to on your show? What do you see as the biggest issue facing women in the workplace?
Yeah, and I love broad questions. And obviously this is my opinion. You could look at it from multiple directions. But the biggest thing by far that I hear is confidence, or a lack thereof, and wondering, how do I get the confidence? So that's why it's called Ask with Confidence, is because there is not that foundation of confidence that you need in order to even begin to ask for things and to go into negotiations feeling like, I got this, I can do this. And you kind of need to have that solid foundation of confidence before you can even get there. So that tends to be the biggest thing among women. There's a book called Women Don't Ask by Linda Babcock and Sarah Lashover. And in it, Linda talks about, as a professor, when she was teaching, she would notice that a lot of the female students would come and complain about men getting positions over them. And through further look and evaluation, it's just because the women weren't asking as much. In our society, as women, we tend to feel like, or wait until somebody recognizes our skills and feel like, hey, I don't want to ask because I don't want to sound pushy. I don't want to be seen as too aggressive. And so we kind of sit back and just expect that our managers will look at us and say, yes, Katherine would be great for this leadership position. She works very hard. I can tell she's dedicated. I think she'd be great for this promotion. Where in reality, oftentimes it's not at the person that is the squeaky wheel is at the forefront of the manager's brain when considering somebody for a position. It's the person that's been updating them on their opportunities. So really, it's getting to be comfortable with being that squeaky wheel, being comfortable with asking. But a lot of that is lacking when we don't have a foundation of confidence.
This is something that I imagine is related to just being assertive as a mode of operation in business, which is kind of, it feels like you have to have the confidence to know that if you are assertive, that you won't lose your job. Or is there some part of this that's based in forecasting really negative events around being assertive and just not wanting to risk that?
So there have been studies that have shown with women when they are more assertive, depending on how it's done, it can be seen as aggressive.
Right.
So a lot of that has, there is fear-based in that. As for women, we need to be seen as nice. And, I guess nice is the word for it. Whereas when you start asking and being assertive, sometimes that can come across as, pardon my French, but bitchy. And so, yeah, it is a fear-based response because of, in the past, how it's been received. And it's not just men that are perceiving it this way. They've done studies where they had somebody ask, like a female ask both a male and a female leader, and the reactions were the same. It came across as aggressive or bitchy to even a female. So those perceptions are kind of ingrained in us. Those stereotypes are ingrained. And so there needs to be a little bit of training around, okay, what does it mean to be assertive? And how do I do this as a female without sounding too bitchy?
Interesting. And it's unfair, of course, to try to compensate for the unconscious bias or bias of the individual that you're trying to negotiate with or communicate with to try and move yourself up in the company. Where, in coffee, for example, we've got this problem with competitions is an example most people know, where a competitor will be aggressive in their tone. And if they're a male, typically it's passionate, translated. So, they're really passionate about the subject. But if it's a female, it's, oh, yuck, they're being too aggressive. And that has actually been written on score sheets before. So it's something that translates across different disciplines and industries for sure. You're saying not that we need to fix women. I know as we've talked about this podcast moving up to this, we discussed this. You said this is not about fixing women. It's trying to get them to. It's not trying to get them to be somebody else. I wonder if you can elaborate on this, because I think in some ways when we talk about this, there is a sense of, oh, well, we have to compensate, or it's still a form of kowtowing to the system or fixing ourselves. How is this not that?
Yeah. So initially the movement was kind of, we need to change how women negotiate. We need to change how women assert themselves in the workplace in order to be more authoritative and more leaders. And a lot of times initially in the beginning, that advice was, will be more like men. But they are finding now through studies that, one, women negotiate just as well as men do. Like the actual skills they need to negotiate with when they're in that actual conversation, they're just as successful, and sometimes even more successful, just because of how women are collaborative. They work together, that women are doing just as well in the workplace in that area. So it's not about fixing the women. It's not about fixing women. It's not about making them more like men. The movement is now more towards, okay, how can we get women to recognize, one, that they have their personal strengths, and then what can we do at the organizational level in order to change the perceptions and how things are working within the organization, so that women have more of a voice and are more heard in the organization. So it's more, we need to change the organization and how we show up versus what skills women need to be taught. So what that looks like in a business, maybe creating programs specifically for women. So I know I do know some in the coffee industry, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But in like the STEM categories, so in technology, where there is a severe gap between how many males versus females are in there, they've created some female-based organizations that aren't just exclusive for women to join, but that men are encouraged to be a part of as well, to figure out how can we make women feel more included and more likely to join our organization. Another thing in looking at that would be like, they've done studies on looking at how much people talk in meetings. So if a meeting room is filled with men and only a couple females, the females are less likely to speak. Men are speaking more often. Whereas if the room is majority female, females will speak more, but the few men in that room will also speak just as much as they normally would. So trying to gap that disparity by maybe pointing out or directly asking the females in the room for their opinion and their thoughts. And you don't need to do this all the time, but just initially, so that way the females in the room start to feel comfortable in voicing their opinion and starting to speak up for themselves. So it's creating an environment that is inclusive and open to both men and women.
That's a great point. I think oftentimes when you're conducting meetings, for example, and giving room for the people who volunteer their voice, I think it's too often that we assume the people who are speaking the most have the best ideas. And oftentimes it's the opposite, actually. The people that don't speak as much are probably thinking more and have considered the problem more even. So it behooves any organization to kind of bring forward in equal measure the participation of all of its employees and pay attention to the balance there, because you're leaving a lot on the table if you're not making room for the full spectrum of the employees and the diversity, hopefully, that your organization has. Which, if you have a diverse organization, that's great. But if it's not diversely participated in, then it doesn't seem like that would be very effective for your business and not very rewarding for the people that are there. It's more window dressing. So this is huge. And you mentioned that these are things that just work. It's not being managing your tone and the way you behave like a man. You're not trying to mimic some, typically seen as male behavior. Being more authentic to who you are while using skills that work for everybody in negotiations and in dealing with difficult conversations. I wonder if you could elaborate on what those kind of universal practices are that we can adopt, and specifically for women in business, and for this podcast, women that are in management roles, or even want to go for management roles or leadership positions within the coffee industry. What things should be practiced in order to gain that confidence to be authentic to yourself while vying for what you want and need as a professional?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to go back to something you said. You talked about how in a room with people, the people that are talking the most don't necessarily have the best ideas. And just a study on that, and you couldn't be more right about that. But men seem to feel more comfortable with just saying things, even if it's not right. They're just okay with putting that out there. Women usually take a little bit longer to process than men. So even in a room, people are kind of rapid fire speaking. A woman might have a thought, but then it takes her a while to get through that thought. And before she feels okay, this thought has been fully developed. I've thought about everything that needs to go through with it. And then by that point, you're about 5 steps ahead. So you're totally right in that we need to allow room for those thoughts to come through. And then to move on to your question, you're right that it's not that women need to be more like men. because again, like I've said before, the studies show that when we show up and try to be more aggressive like a male would, that's also reflected poorly on us. So the areas or the tips that we can use where it's recognizing our personal strengths, and one of the things that I teach a lot in the workshops that I do is a lot of the things that are already out there highlight female strengths. So I'll use Kwame's compassionate curiosity framework, and I think he talked about that in his episode with you, but it's a simple 3-step episode. And if you look at it, it highlights a lot of things that women are really good at. And you see this across all like the recommended tips. So his first step is acknowledge emotions. Women are really good at validating, acknowledging emotions. We're the people that others will come to for comfort because we're more emotional creatures. So this is actually something that we're very good at, and we're very good at doing. We just need to recognize it. The second step is get curious with compassion. Again, that's also an emotional based step. You need to be able to be compassionate. Women tend to be stronger in that area. We ask the question, who do you think of when you think of somebody that's compassionate, in order to figure out how to do this? The answer that comes up is always like Mother Teresa, my mom, my grandma. Again, all very strong female characters. And then finally, the third step is joint problem solving. And all of the studies have shown, and I touched on this earlier as well, that females do much better in joint problem solving tasks. And when females get together, businesses thrive in all areas because we're more collaborative. We're more strong in that collaboration approach. So it's not more so, how do I learn these steps differently? Females are already doing this. We're already very good at it. It's just, how do I get the confidence to do that? And so then the big practice there is, how do I get confidence?
So that's a perfect transition into something that is so relevant to developing confidence, that actually is meaningful, because it's easy for, if somebody has confidence, to be confidently wrong, just like loud and wrong, both men and women, unless you have what you say comes first is competence. So the first step to developing confidence in how you approach this is competence. I wonder if you could dive into that a little bit and explain why this is an important first step.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one thing just to be confident. More attention is given to those that are confident. You look at like a job interview, people have the exact same qualifications, but if they are not confident on delivering it, the person that is going to be more confident is going to be the one that gets chosen, because it's this air of, I can do it. I know how to do it. I'm not going to need you to hold my hand through it. And so with competence is like the education portion. And a lot of times we get convinced that our ideas are wrong, or the thought that maybe the other person knows more than me. But when you have that foundation of, I know what I'm talking about. So this, with going into negotiations or difficult conversations, doing your preparation work is key. Because then when somebody on the other side is saying, well, I think we should do this, this, and this, you have the knowledge to disagree with them. It can be hard to disagree with somebody who seems so confident. And this was seen in the Fire Festival disaster with Billy McFarland. Because he was so confident, he was able to convince people that had the knowledge, but he was just so confident that people were like, I know something more than what I know. Maybe I don't know exactly what I'm talking about. And so he was able to convince them to put money into this plan that had huge flaws just because he had the confidence. But you don't want to just go into it as just, I am so confident, I know what I'm doing, and then you don't really have it all figured out. You want to make sure you have that base of education so that way you can back it up. And that is one of the biggest ways to gain confidence, is having the knowledge, so that when somebody else is talking to you and is saying, no, this is what we should do, you're able to find the holes because you have researched it, you have prepared, you know what you are doing, it brings that confidence about in order for you to disagree.
That's so key. You need both. It sounds like you can't have that knowledge base and be well studied, and then, as you said in the beginning here, expect to be discovered for the knowledge that you've accumulated somewhat in secret, because, as much as we want people to recognize our work, it's true of managers in all organizations that they just get overwhelmed with their own stuff, and it's hard for them to see outside of their own day planner. And so they need people to walk into their office and say things to them to remind them, because they're just people too. They're going to forget that, there's more people than just the people talking to them in the organization, because it's in their best interest to keep things simplified for themselves. So, being confident in striking while the iron's hot and taking that opportunity and recognizing that now is my time to stop, researching. Like, what's the balance between learning enough and then acting on that knowledge? Because I imagine you could just kind of dig yourself into this research hole and never really act on it. Yeah,
I mean, and again, this is another thing that women tend to do more of, is this need for things to be 100% perfect, when it will never be 100% perfect before, they feel comfortable enough to go and apply for something, or go and talk to somebody, or put a paper out there, or whatever. So it does need to be a balance, and this is kind of a gray area. One of the best ways to do it is we offer free guides for difficult conversations and negotiations. You can go to the website and put in your email, and you'll get sent these free guides. And that's a great way, an organized way to go through questions and prepare without either over preparing. And we do say you kind of want to be over prepared. Prepare as much as possible, as much as you have time for, but without it hindering you in being, okay, well, I need to do more. I could always get more information on X, Y, and Z. It's a very nice, concise, organized way to prepare and get that knowledge that you need for your difficult conversation, without kind of going on this tangent of things that might not be relevant and you probably don't need for the conversation.
What would one of those things be?
So, for example, salary negotiation guide. One of the things that we have on all of the negotiation guides is discovering 10 open-ended questions. So you go through all the open-ended questions, and that will give you more than enough questions that you need in order to get through the negotiation. And we have you write out everything directly that pertains to what you're trying to do. And you can do this in 5 minutes, or you can spend a day or two working on it. It just depends on how much you want to prepare, how much time you have to prepare, because sometimes you don't always have the time to prepare for those questions, but it helps you get in the system of preparing things that are relevant for the conversation. And the more you do it, the easier the habit becomes and the more comfortable it becomes.
That makes sense. So when you're going through these guides, the principal idea is, it seems like, forecasting like you would a business plan. You want to think about what's going to happen and what's my contingency plan, and what do I know about this person? If they say X, I say Y. Is it that sort of thing? Like you have to have a little bit of a game plan going in, rather than just throwing yourself at the mercy of whatever comes your way.
Exactly. And this helps you to prepare, so that way you're not just reacting to what they're saying, because that can get us into trouble. Maybe they say something that you didn't think about, and then all of a sudden, your amygdala is taking over, giving you this emotional hijack response, and all you can hope is that the conversation ends and you just agree to anything to try to get out of it. So the idea with preparing is that you are preparing for the possibility, and part of the preparation is looking at, okay, what flaws, looking at it from their point of view. So what flaws could they possibly see in what I am bringing to them, and how do I address that? So that way, when they bring these things up, I'm ready for it. And so it's kind of this plan, so that way you're more likely to succeed, and not being caught off guard, which is where those fear emotions really come up, and then can really throw you off, feeling confident in your plan and ideas.
Wow, that is really useful, and it's so hard. It's so hard to sit yourself down and plan that out when I think so much of our society is based on immediate gratification and just going for it, like hustle culture and all this other stuff. It teaches us that you just got to grab the bull by the horns. And I don't know if anyone's tried to grab a bull by the horns, but I'm pretty sure that's a bad idea. But I mean, you said the amygdala hijack. I was just thinking, like, man, what's the policy you see in movies all the time, that we don't negotiate with terrorists? Well, I guess you should not negotiate with your amygdala in that sense, because that's like holding you hostage is just a perfect metaphor for how I've experienced my amygdala, and probably a lot of other people. I wonder, as you've gone through all of these case studies and worked with people one-on-one, what are some ways that you've seen women break through barriers to be successful beyond their current position, and break through the barriers, whether like social, political, or otherwise, that you've found really encouraging?
Well, I mean, I think you could just go onto Google. You can look anywhere, and find women breaking through barriers. I mean, you have Sheryl Sandberg, you have, who is like the head of the Lean In movement. She's also, I can't remember her exact title, but she was very high up there with Facebook. You have Allison Felix, who has surpassed Usain Bolt's records, and she did it after being 10 months postpartum. You have Mary Barra, who's the CEO of General Motors. So, I mean, you can just look anywhere, and find women really exceeding, really surpassing barriers. And we're doing it all the time. We're just not very good at tooting our own horns, so to speak. And so the biggest keys in that is that anywhere that you look and you ask any CEO, whether it's female or not, or anybody that's at the top of what they're doing, they will all tell you that they failed 5 million times before they got to where they were. And maybe their path wasn't direct, or that wasn't really where they initially saw themselves going. But that's where they are. And they got there through being okay with failure. And one of the big keys in having confidence and being confident is being okay with knowing that you are going to fail. You are going to meet barriers. You are going to come up to barriers. You're going to be told no. And as a woman, you're going to experience that more often than you'd like. And I mean, that's just the way our society is. But having the confidence to, once you hit that failure, okay, how do I move forward? And what are the things that I can do to move forward? And there are plenty of ways that you can go through that. You can get mentors. A lot of it is practice, with gaining confidence or improving a skill. I mean, you want to learn to play piano. You want to learn to improve your designs on lattes. However you want to do that, that is all practice. And that's the same concept with moving forward, with being a leader. It's through trial and error. It's through practice. But the ones that succeed are the ones that have the confidence to know that they are okay after they fail.
That's wonderful. And I'm reminded of Seth Godin's constant refrain, to choose yourself and not necessarily try to find yourself success within a system, but almost like create a system of your own. I remember he mentioned this in a Q&A at one of his podcasts. Somebody's kid was not chosen for a play multiple times, and his suggestion was to basically put on your own play, create the opportunity for yourself. And I'm thinking, as you go forward, especially as a woman in the business world, in these constraints are upon you, and we have that whole idea, I think that book, Beautiful Constraint, there's a lot of creative solutions and advantages that come with having to be creative in the face of difficulty that gives you the last laugh, I guess, because you've developed more than anyone else has had to, in a sense, because you've had to work harder. Not that should be celebrated, that's a condition, but in the end, for a lot of folks, it ends up being sort of an advantage in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Sheryl Sandberg talks about a story about how she got, when she was working at Facebook, they didn't have any parking spaces close to the building for pregnant women. And a lot of that was because, you have males that have been at the top and they don't think about those kind of options. So she just asked, and that went through because, obviously that's something that we need. We just never thought about it. Mm-hmm. So having the creativity to speak up and say, hey, maybe we should do this, or we should try this idea, you might be successful. Maybe it's because, the people that are at the top or the people that you're working with haven't thought about it just because it doesn't pertain to them. And so it's not at the forefront of their brain. Similar to, asking for a promotion or wanting a different position. You need to be the one to talk to them about it, because they might not remember that conversation that you had with them 3 years ago, passing by in the hallway at work. It's just not there at the forefront of their brain. So being creative in your approach as a woman, recognizing that you have different experiences and different values that you can bring to the table, that your male counterparts might not have. And also on the reverse side of that, recognizing that males are not always mansplaining things to us, but also have very valuable and additional insights that can be very valuable to a business as well. So taking all of those collective thoughts, those experiences, that creativity will make the business work so much better and be such a better environment for everybody.
I want to sort of address another thing that I think is really relevant to talk about, and that is, and I can kind of see this happening, and I know that this is something that you address as well, that the confidence that you gain through competence, like you're in the room, you're with the boss, and you want to vie for yourself, and you're really hyped yourself up. In those situations, tends to be a lot of apologizing too. Like that could be one of the a kind of a self-sabotage move. I mean, how do you come to grips with that in yourself? As a woman in business, that tends to be something that is more prevalent as a reaction, or conditioning, social conditioning. How do you overcome that and kind of regulate that within yourself?
Yeah. So, that goes across the board, and it's not just apologizing. There have been studies on the language that women use, and we tend to use more diminutive language. So saying things like, this might sound stupid, this might be a crazy idea, I'm sorry, that kind of area, almost allowing the person on the other side to dismiss us. Because, and this kind of goes along the lines of not wanting to appear aggressive, or, bitchy or rude. And so we've kind of adopted this language, to kind of make us more demure and, minimize the space we're taking up. And so there's not necessarily do this, or this, and I don't say, just stop apologizing, because there are certain times where apologies are necessary, whether you're male or female. But, when you walk into a room, you don't need to apologize for being there. And a lot of that has to do with self-awareness and realizing where that language comes in. I still do it a lot, and I'm trying to get better at it, but it's been years of training and classical conditioning, of where it just comes up. But being more aware of it when you are saying it, and then you can look at those situations. Okay, when am I saying I'm sorry? I would apologize, walking into a room just to talk with somebody. I'm sorry, I just have a few seconds of your time that I need, kind of thing. You don't need to introduce, when you walk into a room, you don't need to introduce yourself with an apology for being there. So it's just a lot of recognition and intuition and kind of reflection of where am I using these words that are kind of dismissing me. And how can I take that out? And when you get that recognition, it's easier to kind of stop yourself. It takes a few times and it's hard. It's still hard for me. But that is the best way to do it, is just that recognition and continued practice, not putting an "I'm sorry" before walking in the room, or not introducing a thought with "this might sound stupid" or "this is a stupid question." Just say, "I have a question."
Love it. That's perfect. Like pattern interruption. Just don't, rob it of its momentum and start examining those things. That's perfect. Well, I think this has really been fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking through this, because it's helping a lot of people in the audience, a lot of women that want to get ahead in coffee. And that's my last question to you really is, what would you say to women in coffee who want to be in leadership, be more assertive and have confidence? Maybe the practical actions, the takeaways from this conversation that they can put into practice that will help them produce better results in their leadership journey.
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple things that you can do. The biggest and key thing that I would always recommend is practice. The more you practice, the better you will get at it. It's going to be hard in the beginning, especially if you come from somewhere where that's not your background or you're not used to it. It's going to be uncomfortable. Difficult conversations, negotiations are uncomfortable in nature. But the more you practice, the more you exercise those opportunities to negotiate, to have difficult conversations, to stand up for yourself, advocate for yourself, the easier those conversations will become. The other thing that I want to advocate for is look for those opportunities. So getting into a position where now I'm teaching and training negotiations, I had to look for that opportunity and advocate to say, hey, yes, I want to do this, because it wasn't my background. And you'll be so surprised at the number of doors that open up when you just start asking for things and putting yourself out there. You're going to be told no, but that is okay, because no is just a door for something else to open up and a different opportunity to open up. So maybe you don't get that leadership position that you want, but then follow up with your boss or your manager. Okay, what are the things that I need to do in order to get into this position? Or do you have anything else similar that you think I could do in the meantime in order to try to get there to better position myself for success? And you might, find a door that opens and puts you down a rabbit hole, and all of a sudden you're teaching negotiation and conflict management. Or maybe it goes in a different direction. Maybe you don't get to where you thought you wanted to be, but a different door opens and you find that you enjoy that so much more. So actually advocating for those opportunities, seeking out those opportunities, and speaking up for those changes that you want. Those would be my big things.
This has really been fantastic, again, Katherine, and so useful. I appreciate your work in this area and all you've shared today. What can we do to stay in touch with you? Where can we find your work? You subscribe to your podcast, and what kind of resources can we be subscribed to or connect with in order to help us move on from here well?
Yeah. So for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. Katherine Knapke, connect with me there. Podcast is called Ask with Confidence. Really good guests, some great guests coming up. So find me there. It's available, on the American Negotiation Institute website. It's available on iTunes, Spotify. So across all the platforms that you can find it. There are the guides that I talked about. If you go to americannegotiationinstitute.com/guides, you can get access to all the guides to help you prepare. And then specifically for women in coffee, if you're wanting to get more involved, help your organization a little bit more, there are some great organizations, and this is not through me, I'm not affiliated with them. But the International Women's Coffee Alliance, or IWCA, empowers women across the globe, whether it's at the stage of farming all the way up to the coffee shop. They help empower women there. There is also the #She'sTheRoaster organization, and that started out as like an Instagram movement for women in coffee to help support them. And it's grown to the point where now they provide scholarships and networking events to help females in the coffee industry. So if you're trying to get more involved as a woman or trying to support more women or don't know where to start with offering those services or getting those services, those would be two really good organizations to reach out to and figure out how you can have more of a voice as a female in your company, or if you are a male, how can you support the females in your company?
Indeed. Those are wonderful organizations. Thank you again. This is really a rich conversation, and your work is really great. Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you so much, Chris. This has been fun.
Well, I hope that you found that episode really enjoyable, but also instructive and encouraging, in that it gives some momentum to your pursuit for a furthering of your career and asking for that raise and pursuing higher positions in your company. And, I think as we were talking about the meeting and hearing from a diverse range of people, and not just the people who speak up the most, which tends to be the guys in the room for the most part, I think it's really important to recognize, as leaders, you have the ability to control the culture of your meetings, of your business, and to not tap into the potential and draw out the best from all your people is really foolish. It is. You have a lot of latent potential in your organization if you've got women that are not being heard as much as the men. And I hope that this episode has spoken to you if you're in a position of power that has the ability to provide a platform that corrects some of these imbalances. That would be great. So a lot of great stuff here in this conversation from Katherine. For sure, you should check out #She'sTheRoaster, as well as the IWCA doing fantastic work, linking to those in the show notes, as well as the free guides from the American Negotiation Institute. And we also have linked in the show notes to Katherine's great podcast, Ask with Confidence. Thank you so much, Katherine, for joining us on the show and sharing your insights into this issue. You've done so much to help us further this conversation, and we really appreciate it. So if you want the transcript for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com, and on the contact page, there is a place for you to fill out your information and also check a box that says, sign me up for the newsletter. And when you do that, you'll be signed up to receive the email on a weekly basis that has not only the transcripts, but the links to different resources mentioned in each show, as well as to recommended episodes to keep you on that kind of train of thought. So each episode, there's about 3 or 4 recommended episodes that I put in there that are related to the topic, and that will be sort of a track of education for you, because we have such a large selection of episodes in the show at this point. Sometimes it's hard to navigate what you need. Those recommended episodes are a great resource for you to sort of dive into the subject a little bit further past the initial episode. So again, go to keystotheshop.com, contact page, and fill out the information. You'll be all set. Also, if you want to reach out to me, you can use the contact page too at Keys to the Shop, or you can just email me directly at chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS at keystotheshop.com. I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear your thoughts and comments about the show. Really just want to hear from you. And also, if you want to reach out to have a conversation about working with Keys to the Shop Consulting, you can use that email too. We work with lots of businesses to help them improve their operations, management, and systems, quality in the store, and also provide over-the-phone consultation and coaching. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, let's have a conversation. Reach out to me and we can hop on a phone call to discuss what that looks like. Chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, in Keys to the Shop news, I'd like to let you know about a couple of great events coming up. First is a one-of-a-kind workshop. I'll be hosting this community of practice for cafe leaders at Ally Coffee with the great Ildi Revi, and that is happening on March 26th through the 27th. There's a link in the show notes for this. If you follow it to Ally Coffee, you can sign up to take this course. The event is meant to present a lot of great information to help you develop as a great leader in your cafe, as well as give you the opportunity to rub elbows with other owners and learn from their experiences as we discuss these topics, where at the end you're going to feel energized and equipped to lead better and to be better as a leader. So an example of some of the things that we're going to be covering are things like using empathy in your systematic solutions in the cafe, kind of taking a proactive approach to managing your health and your time as a leader. We're going to be talking about your relationships at work and the authority, and using the authority that you have in a healthy way, how to communicate in a way that empowers people instead of disempowers them. We're going to be talking about managing managers, communicating with clarity. There's a ton of things. And on top of all that, you get to be in a community of people who are practicing leadership in their cafes, hence the title. And this is a one-of-a-kind thing. I highly encourage you to sign yourself up, sign maybe yourself and some other leaders in your organization up for it. There are only 17 seats left right now, and you definitely want to get in for this. Follow the link in the show notes for the Community of Practice workshop, and I hope to see you there in March. Now, another event that's coming up that I'll be involved with, doing some speaking and latte art judging, of course, is Coffee Fest, and that's coming up in the beginning of March, the 6th through the 8th. And if you don't know, Coffee Fest is the world's best trade show for coffee retailers. Such an amazing selection of educational tracks, seminars, amazing vendors, and a huge community of coffee professionals to learn from over the course of 3 days. And this one is in New York City in March, and that's a great place to go to. A lot of inspiring coffee bars and amazing food too in New York. I'm really excited to go back. So that's March 6th through the 8th. Go to coffeefest.com and click on the New York show to learn more about what's being presented, kind of research what you want to get out of this event before you go. And if you see me at Coffee Fest, please do introduce yourself to me. I'd really love to meet you, and hope to see you there. And after all of that, that is the end of our episode. Thank you so much for listening to this show. I appreciate every single one of you. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.